We did not gather for a typical Smash because, of course, it's a bye week, but we're getting together, and we're getting together thanks to State Farm agent Russ Forhis. More on him in a minute. He's Ira Schafel, managing editor for Warchant.com. My name is Tom Lang, and we thought it was time to do a little bit of a reset. Last week's Smash, Ira, was a group session. Everybody sat down, candles were lit, kumbaya. Now it's time to look forward. Florida State's got 6 more games in front of them, and it's going to be an interesting few weeks to see how that gets started, because I think how they start this next 6 weeks is how they're going to finish.
Yeah, and it's going to be fascinating, and really because there's so many different ways to look at it. From a fan's perspective, I think the total agenda right now is, man, just let's get to figuring out what it's going to look like in 2025. Whatever you've got to do right now, I think if the fans had a say, if they were the bosses and they brought Mike Norvell in for a conference or a job review, I think their message to him would be, do whatever you've got to do from here on out to get us good in 2025.
Yep.
But Mike Norvell is a head coach and wants to win football games. So, he's got that. You have these assistant coaches who are probably coaching for their jobs. You've got some players who are, still trying to audition for the NFL. Some other players who may be looking at where they're going to transfer to next season because things aren't working out the way they had hoped. So there's so many different angles to this. And that's what happens when you lose. When you're a losing football team, everybody starts looking out for themselves. And, we'll have to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, and it all starts Friday night against Duke. But Ira, preceding that, I know Mike Norvell said in recent weeks that depth charts mean nothing and they don't matter. He still keeps updating them. So we like that. The 2 guards, you've got a change there on the offensive line. Mike Norvell, I wouldn't say warned, but he hinted that this might be coming. That schematically they'd be looking at things in the running game and they'd look, very back to day one, square one. What do we need to change? Because clearly it's awful. And I believe he used the word awful.
He did.
On describing that. It's like the perimeter blocking. Those are 2 things he's deemed as, quote, awful this season. Andre Otto, redshirt freshman at left guard. And then Jalen Early, also a younger player at right guard for Florida State, meaning that Jeremiah Byers would play at right tackle. We did see that on some footage from Monday's practice that Aslan took for us of those guys working at those 2 positions, and the depth chart matches it. It seems like Mike is putting his money where his mouth was last week, which is they are deciding to maybe schematically draw things up a little bit differently, very differently.
Yeah, and I think I'm, probably on both sides of the ball to some degree, but mostly on offense. I mean, I think the defense has not been good by any stretch of the imagination, but, the offense has been so terrible. And I think sometimes in a couple of the games, you could probably say the offense being so bad hurt the defense because, the offense couldn't do anything, and the defense kept having to go back out there. So especially like the second half against SMU. So it's it's the opposite of complimentary football. They're I don't know I don't know the opposite of complimentary football, disjointed football, but it's it's been on display. But yeah, I think the interesting thing about not moving Andre Otto, but sticking with Andre Otto at guard is it's not like he was great last week in his first start against Clemson. But I think if you're Mike Norvell, you're asking yourself, okay, can he get better from that? And is he going to be willing to learn? And what is his upside versus, these older guys? You have they have several older guards on this roster that they could put in there. And I don't know, maybe Andre Otto is better than them today, or maybe it's just part of Mike Norvell's calculus is, who's going to help me learn and who's going to help me get better next season. But yeah, as you said, you're going to have 2 new starting guards and totally opposite of what you thought coming into the season. You brought in 3 interior linemen out of the transfer portal, and none of them are going to be in the mix. You're basically going back to your homegrown guys that you think could be the future.
Well, and that's what, again, I was going to say that because it signals something greater happening here, Ira. I mean, if you had Richie Leonard and TJ Ferguson and or Keandre Jones, because that's the way it started. Keandre is a veteran who had been here for a year. But those were your guys to begin the season. And now you've got young pups playing. And for, Jalen Early's sake, he's been playing tackle all year long. So you move him in to play a new position. That signals something for the entirety of the roster, I think. It's more than just about the offensive line and what they look like on Friday night. But now you're seeing LaWayne McCoy appear and, a little bit more prominence on the depth chart. Landon Thomas, Amari Williams appearing with more prominence on the depth chart. Of course, Brock Glenn's a starter at quarterback, and there's no Orr this week. There's no DJU. He's not even on the depth chart because of the injury. Cam Davis is there. It's just, this is a signal that, okay, we thought it was going to be one thing, but here's a piece of paper that says, I know it needs to be something else. Mike Norvell may say that depth charts don't matter, but that's a clear signal that we should expect something different. Doesn't mean it's going to be better and smoother, but we should expect something different on Friday night.
Yeah, and maybe that's part of it is, an acknowledgement to the fan base that the head coach sees what's going on. He sees the same thing that everybody else sees, and he's not just going to ride with the older guys. I think a lot of fans wanted some of these changes to happen 3 weeks ago. Maybe if not after the BC game, then certainly after maybe the Memphis game. But I think, again, as a coaching staff, you're always going to rely. Usually you're going to err on the side of experience and guys who have done it on the college level before. And so I think he was really hoping that by week 3, week 4, week 5, those older guys would start playing at a higher level. And then it just never happened. And again, I think the SMU game was a tilting point. The way they, getting blown out by SMU, to me, you couldn't convince yourself anymore if you're Mike Norvell that guys are close, that if just this thing happens and that thing happens and this guy comes back from injury and this player starts to figure it out, like you can kind of fool yourself sometimes into believing things can get better. But I think that SMU game was really the kind of the tilting point. And from then on, you saw several of those younger guys get in that Clemson game. As you mentioned, Landon Thomas was your leading receiver at tight end. He caught his first career pass 1 week earlier, and now he's your leading receiver. I think you're going to see more of it. I think Mekhi Danzy at running back is going to be a guy you're going to see more of. I wouldn't be surprised if BJ Gibson becomes a weapon, another freshman wide receiver. Listen, man, everybody kind of exaggerates the good or the bad. And I think there's a perception right now that this team is devoid of talent. I don't believe that. I think there's some really good young talent on this team. And these next 6 weeks will give those guys a chance to kind of show it. And then they're still going to have to make a lot of moves in the offseason and probably figure out, how, especially in the trenches. But this team has young skill, and I think you're going to see that. And if Otto and Jalen Early can turn into something, that would be a big deal, going into next season.
Well, and also with Brock Glenn's legs, he doesn't have to be. This is one thing that annoys me, is just because he's mobile doesn't mean he's a running quarterback. But the fact that he's mobile is such a deviation from what Florida State had with DJU that you would have to use it, and it provides you other opportunities to make plays. And it'll be interesting to see how they match up with Duke, who brings a ton of pressure. Ira wrote a piece on this. You can find it on warchant.com right now about how, get ready. Duke obviously likes to keep it multiple, keep you on your toes, keep you communicating. So it'll be one hell of a test for guys like Otto and Early to communicate with Maurice Smith to know where they need to be, because Duke is going to test them in that way. But I agree with you. I mean, this is something where it's never as good as it seems. It's never as bad as it seems. With Florida State going 1-5, it seems like it's awful. And in truth, the record means that you're awful. But the thing that I like about it, I talked about this a little bit earlier on the JCS, which you can find live 1 o'clock weekdays, most weekdays, is that it forces somebody's hand. Like, maybe there were some things, Ira, that ifs and buts, you get out of Dublin with a victory, and Florida State's maybe 4-2 right now because confidence changes and all these other things are happening. The ball might bounce your way because confidence matters a lot. These issues would still be there. They just wouldn't be as detected. Man, at 1-5, the issues are so blatantly obvious for everybody. Mike included, the administration, that change has to come. And so what you're going to get the second half of the season is different. It doesn't mean that's going to be better, but it's something to look forward to, Ira, because, for that stretch there where DJ was the starter every week, you kind of knew what you were going to see, and you weren't going to be pleased for 3.5, 4 hours.
Yeah, and I think really that's going to be the kind of, from a fan base perspective and a media perspective, is really going to be about evaluating what these younger guys look like, who can help you in the future, who can't help you in the future. And then also, again, like, this is going to be a big evaluation for these assistant coaches. This is a staff with, when you talked about things being masked or things not being exposed. I think when you're playing this bad, now Mike Norvell has to evaluate everything. And I think he has to evaluate every assistant coach. And I think the question you got to ask yourself if you're Mike Norvell is not how much do I like any of these assistant coaches, but what are they bringing to this program? Like what value are they bringing? And I think you have to make that evaluation about each assistant coach, each support staff member. They've got a ton of support staff, analysts and recruiting staff. And I mean, he has literally got to go through person by person, position by position, and get as good a staff as he can because clearly this staff has failed miserably. This is not all Mike Norvell's fault. It's not all the players' fault. This staff has failed is a totality. And so he's going to have to evaluate everything on his staff along with trying to fix this roster. So, man, I think as you're watching the rest of the season, you're going to be watching, okay, do any of these position groups show or justify based on the play on the field and what's coming in the pipeline that position coach needs to be here in 2025 and beyond. And so there's a lot to watch, even though this team is 1-5, and as you said, the season's pretty much a loss.
And we're going to talk about the guys that we're excited to see in just a moment. But first, of course, State Farm agent Russ Voorhis. You don't need to reevaluate. If you're a customer of State Farm agent Russ Voorhis, you don't need to reevaluate that relationship. It's fantastic. It is. If you're in the state of Florida, Georgia, or Alabama, he can help you across those 3 states. He has brick and mortar operations on the east coast of Florida. You can see it on the screen if you're listening on the podcast in Jacksonville Beach and Orange Park. That's where Russ Voorhis has the operation. But he is licensed to help you in Florida, Georgia, and Alabama, and you can find him. The website is very simple. It's his name, russvorhis.com, RUSSVORHIS.com. Ira, I'm a customer of his. I know you've consulted with him many a times, not just about Florida State football, but about the insurance game. He can help you, and he can commiserate on a lot of levels. It's a great conversation, and it's a conversation with a Nole who cares just as much as you do that are out there watching this video right now.
Yeah, I think, and if some of our younger viewers, and because I was in that same boat for a long time, I would always just get my insurance through just look up one of the national brands and go to their website and just do it myself. The nice thing about having an agent that you can trust and that you really like is they'll help you through making decisions about your coverage. So you make sure you don't get bad coverage or coverage that doesn't cover what you think it's going to cover. And then also when you have claims, if you get into an accident, somebody rear ends you, whatever it is, they can help you. And Russ is certainly somebody that you would want on your side in those situations. So I can't recommend him highly enough. And like I said, he's a Nole. And if you reach out to him, please mention that you heard about Russ on the Smash or on Warchant.com, because he loves to hear that he's helping Noles, and he will look forward to helping you.
They react when you tell them that too. He runs a great operation. You say, well, why'd you find us? Or how'd you find us? Warchant. Oh, well, we've had a lot of those. So continue the momentum, everybody. That's a climb. That's a steady climb over there with that operation. That's at russvorhis.com. We thank Russ Voorhis for this video. Ira, nobody wants to be here in this situation, where this is like, Orioles have had some lean years. My Mets have had more lean years than many organizations over the last 30. When the September call-ups happen, the rosters expand. It's September 1st. Hey, let's let the kids play. It does generate a little bit of a spike in interest. I'm like, oh, okay. I know that 37-year-old's going to be gone next year, and I can't wait for him to be out of my uniform. But let's see what this 24-year-old who's in Double-A can do against major league hitters. I know he's not ready yet, but let's see him fail and learn from those failures. So in that ilk, you could even be a young batter. When a rookie strikes out, Ira, sometimes he falls literally on his butt and he looks like a fool, but he's got potential. That's why he's in the major leagues. That's what this is about now. Who are some guys that, they're going to make their mistakes, but you're looking forward to seeing what they can do on the upper end of the spectrum?
Yeah, I mean, I think from the guys that we, obviously people have seen now, Amari Williams, that catch for a touchdown against Clemson, Landon Thomas, what he did. A couple guys that you really haven't seen much from. And I tweeted during the Clemson game, I tweeted something like, more Landon Thomas, more Amari Williams, more Mekhi Danzey. And somebody was like, well, why Mekhi Danzey? And he was on the field for a few plays in that game and he dropped a pass. But I'm telling you, man, Mekhi Danzey is a different football player. His speed is not normal. And he's got length. And he's made catches, man. Like, I know he dropped that pass, but he every day in practice since then, he's made a bunch of catches. He made tough catches, contested catches. That's not his number one forte. His number one forte is his speed, but I think he can be a really impressive weapon in the passing game. And also, maybe in some of the ways they wanted to use Jalen Lucas earlier this year. I was kind of a little disappointed they didn't get him on the field earlier, but I think Mekhi Danzy is a big weapon. I also think LaWayne McCoy, who they've been using as a punt returner, he has not gotten many at-bats as a receiver yet, but I think that's going to continue to come. And I mentioned earlier, B.J. Gibson's another one in that freshman class. Cam Fryer is one that we really hope. I thought Cam Fryer had a chance. I love that young skill group. But I think Cam Fryer's dealing with something, so he hasn't been available. But that is it's a good group. It's a good young group, and I think Brock Lynn is going to, I've been impressed by him over the last 2 weeks, man. Like, I'll be honest with you, going into the Clemson game, I was not expecting a big passing day from Brock Lynn. I didn't think the last week or two going into that game looked that great from him as a passer. But I thought he got confidence as that game went on, as he started competing. In the last couple of weeks in practice, man, I've been more and more impressed by him and Luke Kromenhoek. I think DJ being sidelined has kind of thrown them into the deep end, and I feel like they're both rising or raising their level of play. So, Brock is not as new as some of these other guys, but I'm really excited to see what he looks like. And then I'm assuming Luke, he's a true freshman. I'm guessing they'd like to redshirt him if they can. So I don't know if he'll play 6 games left. Maybe he'll play in 4 of them. But I think those two guys, I'm really excited to see what they look like down the stretch.
Well, it's human nature too, Ira. I mean, Brock was put in horrible situations last year. Then they bring in DJ, which signals to him you're not ready. Like, they didn't bring in a guy who played at Wake for a year or two, and you feel like maybe it's going to be a battle. When you bring in a player like DJ Uiagalelei, you're doing so assuming that he's going to be your starter, and Brock feels that. I think he knew that. I'm not saying it's the right thing per se. I'm just saying it's the human thing.
And subconsciously, it's not a conscious decision to not play well. But yeah, man, you're not as sharp if you feel like you don't have to be as sharp because you're probably not going to play. It seems like that might have been the case.
So the confidence, it'd take us through that journey just for Brock. I'll ask you about Luke in a follow-up in a second. But, okay, so he has the performance. DJ's injured, but he has the performance against Clemson. You think that from what you've seen in practice, that has parlayed itself into sharper performances in practice? Because Brock wasn't scaring the starting job at any point during fall camp or these previous weeks. But it seems like it's a little bit contagious what he did on the field against Clemson.
I think so. I've been impressed by him. It's just, and it's not like a bunch of unbelievable throws, but now he's making the routine throws look very routine. And that wasn't something we were seeing. And quite honestly, there were a lot of times we didn't see that from DJ. I mean, even when we thought this was a team that could win 9 games, maybe 10 games, we thought we never were blown away by DJ's accuracy. I mean, he's got 4 years of tape that says he's not a very accurate passer. And the frustrating thing about DJ is he can make that unbelievable throw, like his touchdown against Cal, but then he can airmail a couple of very easy throws. Brock and Luke were missing a lot of easier throws, I felt like, through much of camp and then early this season. But I feel like their confidence is growing, especially Brock for sure. I think he's putting it on people now. I'm not saying every pass is perfect. I'm not saying he's going to go out and win the Heisman, but from play to play consistency and accuracy, I'm just seeing much more out of him than I had before he got that opportunity to play.
Yeah, I think the most damning thing you can say about DJ, and I'm not the type, me, Ira. I'm not the guy who's like piling on DJ this, DJ that. I mean, he has been good. But that Brock can waltz in a situation like he did against Clemson and be more on time with the football. It's like, man, you had 2 camps. And that's not all on DJ. That's on the coaching staff, too, to make sure that, the plays that they're calling for him are on time. The only throws he was really on time for were the ones that were like 50 yards to gain 12, sprinting out and throwing across the field. And those are phenomenal throws. Like Joe Flacco's got that throw. Not many other people do. But outside of that, the in-breaking routes, the hitches, the throw to Amari Williams up the seam, it's on time. There's anticipation in those throws. You noted that coming right out of the game. That was one of your observations about what Brock has done. Yeah. It looks night and day. and certain aspects of what he does. I'm sure that the team has responded to that too, because number one, if I'm a receiver, I might get the ball in a timely fashion. And then number two, I've been going to war with this guy in practice and camps for a while now. So Brock is part of the program.
Yeah, man. Listen, it's, receivers, you can be, I'm not questioning anybody's toughness, but any college football player for sure, because I've never done anything nearly as physically demanding as what they do every single day. But if you're a receiver and you're concerned about your own personal welfare, you want a quarterback that throws it on time. Yeah. Because if you don't, that means you've got to sit there and wait. Like you're only going to be open for a fraction of a second. The defenses are too good, players are too quick and athletic on that side of the ball. So the longer you're open and waiting for the ball, that's more time for the defense to recover and clean you out. And so, man, that matters to receivers. They want quarterbacks who are going to throw them open, that are going to throw with anticipation and give them a chance to not be sitting ducks. And so I think, why was DJ like that? Some quarterbacks don't throw great with anticipation, but also I think it spoke to a lack of comfort with this offense. And I think an attentiveness, and he wanted to make sure he saw what he saw before he threw the football. And to your point, man, I 100% agree. That's on the coaching staff as much as anybody. You had him for 9 months. We don't have to relitigate the decision to sign DJ, but I'll never argue any other side than this. You had him in your program since January, and you did not find something that he felt comfortable with, and that's on you. He's not the worst quarterback that's ever played, but you made him look like it at times by some of the things you did. So I'm sure some of it's on DJ too, but it was a failure on the whole coaching staff. And yeah, man, I think Brock showing some of that anticipation it's 100%. It's going to make the receivers, running backs, everybody happy.
It should, and what we'll see on Friday night is how much that influences the defense too. Because if they believe that the offense has a pulse, they might elevate their game. It's contagious. Winning 100%. Is contagious, and so is losing. That's why this is the ultimate team game football. Now, what we can tell you too is when you're coming to town to Tallahassee for the Florida State North Carolina game, the Whataburger Touchdown Tour, Ira, is coming to Florida State. How about that? The Whataburger Touchdown Tour.
We've been hearing about it. I want to know what all the fuss is about.
Well, the fuss is about a giant truck that's coming to town, and it's cooking up made-to-order Whataburgers. So it will improve your game day experience, and we know the game day experience needs improving because I'm not talking about Florida State's presentation, in terms of the stuff they do. I'm talking about the football itself. How can it be made better? Well, the Whataburger Touchdown Tour can do that. Power up your game day menu and stop by the Whataburger food truck during your tailgate. Get ready to watch your team by securing an easy W before kickoff with a hot, fresh Whataburger. And no matter who comes out on top, come on, keep the streak against Mac Brown alive, Noles. When you take your squad to Whataburger, you'll know that you'll feel like a winner by getting your food made your way, fresh and hot every time, 24/7. See you at the game before FSU and UNC, and see you at Whataburger. Truck location information is coming soon.
Whataburger's good, man. I don't know how far south they go, but growing up, we obviously never had it in Miami. But Whataburger's the truth, dude. It's good stuff.
So they had it for a brief period of time when I was in the happy zone, high school / college. They had it in North Pinellas, where I would go home every summer. I still have a Whataburger number 48 because that's my lucky number. I still have that thing. I kept it. It was in my car forever, like a total college. It was like in the mirror thing. It was propped up there, dude.
Up in the brand.
In terms of a burger from a fast food joint, once or twice a year, I crave nothing but Whataburger, and I have to go get a Whataburger. So there you go. You got all the love in the world, burger people. I was going to ask you about Luke Kromenhoek, and I really want to hear what you have to say about Luke, because I thought, Ira, he wasn't even close for much of his first year, and he's a true freshman. He's not supposed to be. But obviously his high school tape speaks for itself, and clearly things have to have improved because Mike Norvell makes a point to bring him up often enough, especially last week before the week before the Clemson game. What have you seen out of Luke and his journey from his first camp to where he is now, potentially getting some drives in games?
It's funny. I was talking to somebody. I think it was a former player that came by practice one day early in the season or during camp, and they were asking me what I thought about Luke, and I said, man, throwing on air, like it's awesome. I mean, he's got a great arm. He really does. And I love the way he throws the football. And they're like, yeah, well, you and I can throw it on air. And I'm like, oh, not quite like that. But you, like a lot of freshmen, once you go to 7-on-7s, well, 1-on-1s, it's a little bit harder. Then you go to 7-on-7s, and now it's even harder. Then when you go to 11-on-11s, plus he's playing a lot of times with the threes,
Mm-hmm.
it's just hard, man. It's hard to really evaluate sometimes those third string quarterbacks because they're working with a different, the youngest receivers, the youngest line. Players don't always know the plays. I mean, it's just kind of it's hard to evaluate sometimes with those guys. But even when, there were times where he had time or at 7-on-7, I didn't feel like he was, on point sometimes with his passing, which kind of surprised me because I've seen him throw really well. I do feel like similar to Brock, man. I feel like the last few weeks it's been getting better and better. And honestly, there was a day last week, I think last Wednesday, I was real impressed with both of them. And then on Monday of this week, I thought they both looked really good. I still think there's still, you can tell the difference in terms of knowledge. But I would say this, there was an instance Monday where he threw the ball just in a not exactly the place Norvell wanted it, but then when Norvell came over to him and explained it to him, he like looked him right in the eye. Oh yes, sir, I know. And he knew exactly what he was talking about, and you could tell they're on a higher level than he was before. A lot of times, freshmen or players that just don't really get it, you just don't. You can tell when the coach is saying something whether or not they're getting it. And it feels like he's getting it more, and I think he's getting closer and closer. So I'm really excited, man. I think that my guess would be, again, I don't know what they're going to do, but my guess is I think in an ideal scenario, you got a road trip to Duke and a road trip to Miami. Duke's defense has been very good, and it's very obviously high pressure, very multiple and very high pressure. Miami's defense will be the best defense probably they've faced since, maybe one of the best defenses they'll face all year. So I don't know if either of those on the road is a great spot to put Luke in. And then you've got those last 4 games. And I think that I would give him a chance. And you and I, we've argued this a little about whether or not this is totally Brock's job or not. I think it is Brock's job for now, but I do think you got to give Luke some opportunities, especially in those last 4 games. And I'm excited to see what he does, man. I think both of those guys, and this isn't a knock on DJ, but I do feel like they both feel a little bit liberated. They're getting the best coaching. They're getting to play with the best players. It's not that they're getting more reps necessarily, but they're getting the best reps. And I think that's raising both of their level of play.
So yeah, and we can revisit that talking point in just a minute. Like for me, the reason I think Brock earned another go after that performance at Clemson. I think like Mike at that point you say, wow, given the circumstances, well done. It's yours, right? And it doesn't mean that in perpetuity, but for Duke, you know what I mean? It's your show. And it clearly is on the depth chart, which doesn't matter. But how would you differentiate other than, I mean, they're different players, Ira, but for people who don't know what Luke is all about and they have seen Brock, I mean, mobility, arm strength, I know that Luke has a bit of a different delivery too. Just what are some things that stand out to you that are different about those two?
Yeah, I think to me, I think Brock is I've never felt like Brock does a great job of pushing the ball down the field. And maybe it's, just because he hasn't had a lot of opportunities. But in that game against Clemson, he kind of opened my eyes a little bit. A couple of the balls that he threw down the middle, especially between the hashes, I was like, okay, all right, I can see it, Brock. Because a lot of times in practice, it feels like he's much more focused on the underneath stuff, not as accurate with the deeper passes. And I haven't seen like an amazing touch with the deep ball. Whereas Luke, I think, is a little bit more polished on some pushing the ball down the field and a little bit on the deep ball. And I think he's got a little higher upside as a passer. Now Brock is I think what Brock gives you is that toughness and, the running ability, but not just running ability because he's fast, but like just a wherewithal about him. I think he's the kind of kid to me. There was a play in practice last week. I didn't write about it or anything. It was a play in practice last week where he ended up running in for a touchdown. And I won't describe the play, but he ends up running in for a touchdown. And I think half joking, he did like one of the celebrations that you see the DBs or defensive players do, like after a big play. No, it wasn't that one.
On that one?
It was the one where you like they lift up their shirt and like you
Oh,
could argue whether or not, but it was like it was a he's one of the guys, like
right.
and he wasn't doing it like to be like Mr. Tough Guy. I think he was doing it as a joke. Like he was kind of laughing as he was doing it. But remember like last year when he scored and he did the dance?
Yeah.
Like he is one of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And DJ never really was one of them. Jordan was one of them. You'd like to hope that Luke is one of them, just one of the guys. And so Brock has that in spades. Like, I think he's the dude that could hang out with probably anybody on the team, just, really and kind of blue collar. Luke to me is more of what I would say, okay, that guy could be a first round NFL pick, within a couple of years. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I think he's got that upside. I don't know that Brock has that upside.
Blue collar, we got a little class warfare going on here. One carries himself as royalty. The other is he's earned his stripes from the streets.
And well, Brock went to a private school, I think, and so we can't. But no, I mean, I'm saying like in terms of perfect example, people have made the comparison to Casey Weldon because he wears number 11 and because he's built similarly or whatever. Casey was finished high in the Heisman Trophy balloting, but he was never going to be the top 10 pick in the NFL draft. Yeah. Brock Glenn's never, I don't think, is ever going to be a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. Kromenhoek, I think, could be that kind of guy. But that doesn't mean Brock won't give you a better chance to win these next 6 games or even next season. But to me, that's the difference. I think Luke's got a little bit more upside.
All right, so we're getting set, obviously. All the coverage here is warchant.com, Warchant TV, ahead of Florida State's second half of the season. Very important stuff. Condensed week, Friday night game against Duke, 7 o'clock ESPN2. Ira, what's one thing you hope does not get on the plane with Florida State and it makes its way up to Durham? One thing that you can burn and say, I don't want to ever see that again. I'm giving you the pick.
I mean, could it be anything other than the bubble screen? I don't. I mean, there's other things, but could there be anything else higher on the list? Yeah, man, this is a team. I mean, maybe it's just because I just sat down with Coach Henshaw to do a Henshaw's house, but it feels like every time we sit down and talk about this team, when you talk about physicality and their lack of physicality on those screens, it's pointless. Like, if you're not going to block people out there, then why even call it? Last year you had guys, Johnny Wilson would block dudes into the benches. I think Hakeem's got that. It's just not there right now with this team. And so, man, that's enough of that. If I never see that again, it'll be too soon.
Well said. You? No, well said. I could add something. Like, how about third and passing? No more zone, please, for the love of God. Like, especially these breakdowns, they happen at every level, and this is where the assessment thing, coaching for your job thing, is important to me, Ira, because we're halfway through the season and there's still coverage busts, and I felt like they were just getting it down where they were switching on motion against motion, and it's like, what are we breaking out the zone for? God, dog. So on third down, I cringe. I'm looking at the alignment, and I'm doing my best Dominic Robinson based upon where the alignment is, and I'm going, I don't know. But the correct answer, that would be the number 2 answer on the Family Feud board. You control the board with the wide receiver screens, especially on the first drive of the freaking game, Ira. Like, they're not setting it up. Like, that's a base play. He's going to call it, though, because of their blitzes. So get ready for screens because of the blitzes. We appreciate everybody for participating here, in the comments section underneath on Warchant TV, obviously in the podcasts. Thank you for listening to us. Again, RussVorhis.com is the place to go. He sponsors this video, and Russ is a great sponsor, RussVorhis.com. He's Ira. I'm Tom. Stay tuned for coverage all week. Everything from articles to the Warchant Report, Seminole headlines on a Tuesday morning, the Jeff Cameron Show, pregame, postgame. We've got it all for you on warchant.com, Warchant TV, and we will talk to you throughout the week. Make sure to hit the like button if you're watching on the way out.